Okay, today we're going to talk about simplifying rational expressions. The first thing you need to know is rational. If we're talking about a rational expression, that means rational has to be set up as a fraction. So if you look at all of our examples, you will notice all of our examples are fractions. So our job today is to simplify a fraction. And so we have our steps listed here that we need to go through. And the first one says factor the numerator and denominator if possible. And when we say factor, that does include GCF. So I would start with GCF first. So let's choose color here. Okay, so GCF first, and then from there you can go ahead and then try to factor from there. But always check for a GCF and see if they have that first. Okay, then after the GCF factoring step, then we're going to go through and state any restrictions. And restrictions are, if you look at the parentheses, it says whatever makes the denominator 0. Because if you have a calculator, and if you take out your calculator, and if you take and you go 0 divided by any number you want. So if I take 0 divided by 2, then my calculator will say the answer is 0. So no big deal, that one works out. So you can have 0 in the numerator, great. But now what if I flipped it on my calculator? If I said, what if I took any number I want, 4, and I divided it by 0, my calculator will say, not possible, error. Something is wrong with the problem. So that's why it's saying restrictions, and it's talking about the bottom, the denominator, because you're not allowed to have 0 in the denominator. So that's what we're doing, is we're saying it will work for every single number except for these following numbers, because these will make a 0 in the denominator. So your restriction is going to be listed as x cannot equal, so you put it equals with a slash through it for not equals. And then you're going to list out all the numbers that would make the bottom turn into a 0. Then your third step is we're going to look for anything that we can cancel up and down, that they have in common or that we can reduce. And then the last step is we'll just kind of take whatever we didn't cancel out, write that down, and we'll write our restrictions with it, and then we're done. So if we look over to the side at our first example on A, so remember we always check for GCF first. And if I look at the top, I notice it does have a GCF of, and remember greatest common factor, so pick the highest one, and I would say, oh, they're both divisible by 20. So 20 goes on the outside, divide each one of those by 20 and tell me what you have left, which is 2x plus 1. Okay, now we'll go to the bottom, and on the bottom I'm going to check for GCF as well, and I notice that this one also has a GCF, and the highest one is 10, so divide each one of those by 10 and I get x plus 3. So now I'm going to look for my restriction. So somewhere down here toward the bottom, I'm going to go x cannot equal. And if you look at the bottom, which is kind of here in blue, the part that contains x is the parentheses that has x plus 3. So what you're doing is you're thinking, what number could I plug in for x that if I add 3 to it, it would make it equal 0. Okay, if you can do that in your head, great, wonderful. If you could say, oh, I know, -3 plus 3 makes 0. So that means my restriction is -3. Then you got it. If you're not sure, then what you could do is you could just say, all right, take that part, pretend like you solve it. So like a regular equation, so set it equal to 0. And then to move a +3, I would subtract it. So then I would get x equals -3, and that's how you can get your restriction number right there. So if you're never not sure, then just take your part that contains the x on the bottom and just pretend like you're solving it and set it equal to 0. Okay, so now let's go back up and see if we can cancel anything out. In order to cancel out a parentheses, then the parentheses have to be identical on top and bottom. Our parentheses are not identical because our parentheses on top is a 2x plus 1, and the parentheses on the bottom is an x plus 3. They are not identical, so I cannot cancel those out. But let's look at the information that's not in the parentheses, and I have 20 over 10. 20 over 10 are both divisible by 10, so if I divide 10 by 10, then that becomes a 1, and if I take 20 and divide it by 10, it becomes a 2. So then on top you're looking at 2 parentheses 2x plus 1 over, on the bottom you don't really have to write the 1 out in front of that parentheses, so I'm going to leave that. And if I don't write that 1, then I really don't have to keep x plus 3 in parentheses. You can, but you don't necessarily have to. So that's what it simplifies down to, and then I'm going to keep the restriction off to the side. Some people write it below it, but just as long as you have what it simplifies to and that you also has the restriction, and then you're finished, that is your final answer. Okay, so let's go try another one. So on top, it does not have a GCF, and this one I notice it starts with a 1x squared. So if it starts with a 1x squared, I have to think, what kind of factoring am I going to do? Am I going to do fast factoring, long factoring, or difference of squares? And if I have a 1x squared with 3 terms, then I'm going to do fast factoring. And so remember, we've talked about if you still need to make the x for fast factoring, you can. But instead of making the x, we know that you're going to multiply for the last number and add for the middle. So you're thinking, what multiplies for -15 that adds for -2? So that would be -5. And +3. And then on the bottom, it does not have a GCF. And I noticed that this one has a 1x squared, but it only has 2 terms. So this one is a difference of squares. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my 2 parentheses. And then what times itself makes x squared, and that is x and x. Difference of squares is always 1 plus, 1 minus. And what times itself makes 9, that is 3 and 3. Okay, so now I'm going to jump down here and I'm going to make my restrictions. So if I look at the first parentheses, what number plus 3 makes 0? And that would be -3. And the second parentheses, what number minus 3 makes 0? And that would be +3. Okay, and then if I go back up, what is something that is identical on top and bottom? And I would be like, oh look, there is an x plus 3 and an x plus 3 on top and bottom, so those two cancel out. So what I have left is x minus 5 on top and x minus 3 on bottom. Now, every year I will get this. I will have someone ask me, hey, why can I not just cancel these two x's right here on top and bottom? Because on question 1, you went 20 and 10 reduced. Okay, I am not allowed to cancel these x's because do you notice after the x, there is a minus sign after each one? So if you have a addition or a subtraction sign after a term, then it is considered to be grouped. So this x minus 5 is considered to be grouped together. So that means you have to cancel all of it or none of it. But if you look over here in the first one, 20, there is no plus or minus after 20. There's a parentheses. So if there's no plus or minus after that, that means that I can cancel part of it out. I didn't have to cancel all of 20 out. Okay, so hopefully maybe that helps you realize that on this one you are not allowed to cancel those x's because the minus sign means it has to be grouped together. Okay, moving on. On the top of this one, we have a 3x squared. There is no plus or minus, which means that is just one term, and you cannot factor or GCF with just one term. So we're going to leave that alone. Actually, I'm going to erase that and move that down a little bit. Okay. On the bottom, I do notice that it has a GCF, and a little tip for you. If you look at this one, you're going to notice that this one is missing a c term. It has the ax squared minus bx, but it doesn't have a c. So if you're missing a c term, it's always going to have a GCF, and your GCF should always at least contain a letter. It might also contain a number, but it will at least always contain a letter. And for this one, I would say, oh yes, it contains a 3. And also an x. And then if I divide that out, I'm left with 2x minus 1. So now down here for my restrictions. Okay, if you look at this one, we'll start on the bottom, and you'll notice that we have this 3x that's not in a parentheses. So you want to think to yourself that that is saying 3 times x. The only way to make that become 0 is to have 3 times 0, because 3 times 0 is 0. Now, if you are not sure about that, then remember you could just think 3x equals 0, and then divide by 3, and 0 divided by anything is 0. Okay, for the part in parentheses, 2x minus 1. Okay, for this one, you would have to switch the sign for the 1, and then now this one has a number in front of x, so then you would have to divide by it, so you would have positive 1/2. If you're not sure about that, then once again, you could set it equal to 0, so 2x minus 1 equals 0. You could add the 1 over, so 2x equals positive 1, and then divide by 2, and you could get x equals 1/2, which is what we had. But remember, the trick is change the sign of the plain number, and then anything in front of x you divide. Okay, so now we're going to go to the part where we try to cancel something out. I can't touch the parentheses because there's no parentheses on top. But what's not in parentheses, you should notice that I have a 3 and a 3. And then I have an x on bottom and an x squared on top. So I can get rid of this x on bottom. And then instead of an x squared on top, if I eliminate one of those x's, that changes it to just x. So then I should have x over 2x minus 1. Okay. So on D, there's no GCF. I notice it has 2 terms, so this one is a difference of squares. So difference of squares, I'm going to draw 2 parentheses. What times itself makes x squared, and that is xx. 1 plus, 1 minus. What times itself makes 16, that is 4, 4. On the bottom, it doesn't have a GCF, and this one does not start with a 1x squared, so this one is going to be long factoring. Okay, and long factoring, you're going to have to make the x, so I'm going to jump way down here. So I'm going to make the x, and remember it's a times c, so 3 times 4 is 12, and the middle is 13. So what multiplies for 12 that adds for 13? And that is 1 and 12. And then I'm going to make the box. So then I'm going to put 3x squared, 1x, 12x, and 4. If I look up and down, 3 and 12 are both divisible by 3, and they each have an x. Now switch to multiplying. So I would put an x over here, a 1, and a 4. So then on the bottom I would have 3x plus 1 and x plus 4. So restriction. So switch the sign, which makes it -1. Divide by the number in front of x, so -1/3. Second parentheses, I just switch the sign, so -4. And then what is exactly the same on top and bottom? And that would be x plus 4, so they cancel. So my final answer is x minus 4 over 3x plus 1, along with my restriction. Okay. E. Oh, this one I noticed it has a GCF. So I'm going to start with taking out a GCF, which is 2. So I'm going to take out a 2. So that gives me 2x squared plus 5x. Whoops, that doesn't look very good as a 5. Let me erase that and try again. And then minus 12. Okay, but don't stop here on the top, because you'll notice that inside the parentheses, you can continue on. You should still be able to factor what's inside the parentheses. And we're going to have to do some long factoring for this one, because it's not a 1x squared, it's a 2x squared. So I'm going to go ahead and make my x. And 2 times -12 is -24, and 5 is in the middle. So multiply for -24, that adds for 5. That is going to give me +8 and -3. And then I'm going to make my box. So 2x squared, 8x, -3x, and -12. Okay, the only thing they have in common up and down is an x. Switch to multiplying, so 2x, 4, and -3. So keep your GCF, which was a 2, and then you should have x plus 4 and 2x minus 3. All right, on the bottom, I noticed on the bottom it has a GCF, so let's start with a GCF. So I'm going to take out an 8 first, so 8, and then x squared minus 4. But don't stop there, because x squared minus 4, I can keep factoring that. That looks like difference of squares. So I'm going to keep my 8. And then I'm going to go make my 2 parentheses and have x plus x minus, and then multiplies for 4 is 2 and 2. Okay, restriction. If I look at the bottom, the 8 does not have a variable with it, so don't worry about the 8 with the restriction. So just go to the first parentheses, and that would be -2. The second parentheses would be +2. Canceling. None of the parentheses cancel, but I do have a 2/8, and the 2 would cancel to 1, and the 8 would become a 4. So I don't really have to write the 1 on top, so I should just have x plus 4 and 2x minus 3 over 4 parentheses x plus 2 parentheses x minus 2 along with my restriction. Okay, last one. Oh, 4 terms. If you have 4 terms, remember 4 terms, you go straight to the box. So I'm going to make a box, and then I'm going to put 4 of them in it. And then if I look up and down, the only thing they have in common is an x. And then if I switch to multiplying, that's going to be x squared, and then 4, and then -9. So I have x plus 4 and x squared minus 9. Oh, but don't stop there, because do you notice that we have an x squared minus 9? X squared minus 9 is a difference of squares, so you have to keep going, don't stop, don't stop. So then you're really going to break this one down into 2 parentheses. So we're going to keep our x plus 4, and then we're going to break this down into x minus x. Oh, I need to erase that. Hold on, I didn't give myself enough room. So then we're going to have x minus 4, or plus 4 still. And then we're going to go x minus x plus, and then what times itself is 9, and that is 3 and 3. Okay, on the bottom, I notice on the bottom it has a GCF. So I'm going to start with a GCF. So I'm going to take out a 4, and if I take out a 4, then I will have x squared plus 7x plus 12. But don't stop there, because you can factor, and this one we can fast factor, yay, because it's a 1x squared. So what multiplies for 12? That adds for 7. And that would be 4 and 3. So I'm going to rewrite the whole thing. So here's my top. X plus 4, x minus 3, x plus 3. On the bottom, I have my GCF, and then I have x plus 4, x plus 3. Okay, restriction. You don't have to pay attention to the 4 because it doesn't have a variable x on the outside with it. The first parentheses would be -4, and the second parentheses would be -3. And then I would say, ooh, x plus 4 cancel out, so let's get rid of that. And x plus 3 also cancels out, so let's get rid of that. So then on the top I have x minus 3, and on the bottom I have 4. And then we are done.